Have you ever cried at a regular commercial? Maybe about coffee, or a phone plan, or some dog running across a field toward its owner. You sat there thinking, something must be wrong with me. Or maybe it wasn't a commercial. Maybe it was a song you'd heard 100 times that suddenly just hit differently. Or someone said something kind to you, completely out of nowhere, and your eyes went before your brain even had a chance to vote. And the thing that gets me personally, the thing I keep thinking about, is that these people, the ones who cry easily, spend so much energy being embarrassed about it, apologizing for it, holding it in public like it's some kind of malfunction, when actually, there's something going on under the hood that's worth understanding. Hey, welcome back. If you're here for the first time, we take psychological topics that sound soft and vague and pull out the actual biology behind them. Today, that biology is about tears. Stay till the end because the last part genuinely surprised me when I read about it. And if this topic hits close to home, well, if you're that person in the room who starts crying, write something in the comments. I'm curious how many of us there are. Also like and subscribe if you want more of this. Takes 2 seconds. All right, let's go.
So, why do some people cry more easily than others? I want to be clear. I'm not talking about people going through something specific. Grief, loss, a rough patch, that's different. I mean people who cry at ads, at movies they've already seen, at other people's good news. The threshold is just lower. The baseline is higher. Call it whatever you want. And here's where it starts getting interesting. There's a researcher, Elaine Aron. We've mentioned her on this channel before. There's a video. Check it out. You might find it useful. Who identified what she called sensory processing sensitivity. About 15 to 20% of people have nervous systems that are just turned up louder than everyone else. More input and depth, more texture in every experience. And one of the things that comes with that? A lower threshold for emotional response, because the system processes more, not just intellectually, but emotionally. You feel the weight of things more sharply. Don't think of this as some kind of weakness. It's just more threads running simultaneously. Picture it this way. Most people's emotional system is like a regular speaker. You need to turn the volume up pretty high before you really feel it. People with heightened sensitivity, it's like someone installed better speakers. The same signal hits differently, stronger and deeper. And here's something I didn't know until I started looking into it. This isn't distributed evenly across situations. People with heightened sensitivity don't just feel more sadness, they feel more of everything. More joy too, more awe, more of that specific feeling when music does something unexpected and something happens in your chest without your permission. Research actually shows that the same neural systems responsible for deeper emotional processing are also responsible for more vivid aesthetic experience. The person crying at the ad isn't just sad. They're someone whose system genuinely experiences beauty and meaning at higher intensity. The tears are just the overflow. That's the hardware side. But there's another side. And this is the one that surprised me.
Crying is actually not a sign that you've been overwhelmed. I know that sounds backwards, but stay with me. There's research, and I'm going to dive into the details for a moment, on what's called emotional flooding versus emotional processing. And they're not the same thing. Flooding is when you're so overwhelmed that the system just short circuits. You disconnect, you can't think, you freeze. Processing is different. Processing is when the nervous system is actively working through something. And crying? For many people, crying is processing. It's the way the body moves emotion through itself, instead of storing it somewhere it doesn't belong. There's a reason people say they feel better after a good cry. You can't call that a placebo. There's actual biology behind it. Emotional tears, and this is a real distinction, not just metaphor, contain higher concentrations of stress hormones than, say, the tears you get from cutting an onion. The body is literally excreting cortisol. You're physically offloading stress chemicals through your tear ducts. Which means crying easily might actually be a more efficient stress response than not crying. The person who cries at the ad is clearing and releasing everything that's built up, while the composed person next to them is accumulating it.
Because crying easily doesn't just come from sensitivity. Sometimes it comes from somewhere older than that. And I want to be careful here, because this isn't universal, but it's common enough to be worth saying. Some people cry easily because at some point, crying was the only thing that worked. Think about that for a second. In certain childhood environments, not necessarily dramatic ones, not necessarily what most people would call trauma, but in homes where emotional needs were inconsistently met, where things were unpredictable, where you weren't sure whether the person you needed would show up for you, a child learns what gets a response. And sometimes tears got a response when words didn't. Not because the child was being manipulative, that's not what I'm saying, but because the nervous system is a learning machine, and it learns what works. So the adult who cries easily at things that seem out of proportion to the situation, sometimes they're running an old pattern. The system learned. When something gets too big, this is how we signal it. This is how we become visible. And this can coexist with genuine sensitivity. It's not one or the other. A lot of people who cry easily have both. Genuinely more emotionally tuned in, and also carrying an old way of processing that developed when they needed it. I'm not saying that to make things heavy. I'm saying it because understanding the difference actually matters for how you work with it. And there's a third version worth naming. Not sensitivity, not old pattern, but load. Some people cry easily because they're just carrying too much right now, and the system was holding everything together fine until it hit the specific thing, the song, the ad, the kind word from a stranger that just tipped it over the edge. The tears aren't about that thing. That thing is just the last straw the system was waiting for. If you've ever cried at something small and then realized mid-cry that you weren't actually crying about that, you were crying about the thing from 3 weeks ago that you hadn't had time to process, this is what's happening. Your nervous system found a moment that felt safe enough to let go, and it took it. Which means the trigger isn't the point. The trigger is almost never the point.
Now, and this is the part I genuinely didn't expect when I went down this rabbit hole. People who cry easily tend to have a stronger empathy response. Measurably stronger. Not they seem nicer, actually stronger in how the brain processes other people's emotional states. There's research on mirror neurons, the brain systems involved in modeling other people's inner experiences. And people with higher emotional sensitivity show greater activation in these systems when they observe others going through something. Which means, practically, when someone close to them is in pain, they don't just understand it intellectually, they feel a version of it. The boundary between their emotional state and someone else's is genuinely thinner. That's why people who cry easily are often the ones you call when something goes wrong, not necessarily the ones who will solve the problem, but the ones who will actually be there, who won't make you feel like a burden, who won't check their phone while you're talking, because their system is built for it. And here's the flip side nobody talks about. Being the person people call when something goes wrong is exhausting because you take it on. You don't get to just hear it and move on. It comes home with you. It sits next to you at 2 a.m. You carry it for them in a way they might not even know about. The crier in the room is often the one absorbing the most and saying the least about what that costs.
So, what do you do with all of this? Honestly, I want to be clear. I don't think the goal is to cry less. That framing is wrong, I think. The goal, if there even is one, is to understand what's happening when it happens. If you cry easily because your nervous system is genuinely more tuned in, that's not something to fix. That's a feature running at full volume. The question is whether you're using it intentionally or whether it's using you. If you cry easily because you're carrying something old, a pattern that developed when you needed it, then the work is different. Not about suppression, about building other channels, other ways of being visible, signaling, processing, so that tears aren't the only tool you have. And if you cry because you're absorbing someone else's emotional load and there's no room left for your own, that's a completely different conversation. The point is, crying easily is not one thing. It looks the same from the outside, but what's underneath it matters. And understanding what's underneath it is the only way to actually work with it, instead of just being embarrassed by it. Write in the comments, do you cry easily? And when you do, does it feel like relief or does it feel like losing control? Because those two things are very different. And the answer probably tells you more about what's actually happening than anything I said in this video.